everyone, and thank you for joining our next panel, Becoming an EVA/VA, How to Get Started and Build Your Clientele. I'm your moderator, Liz Prue, VP of Marketing at BASE, and I am so excited to be joined by our two wonderful panelists. We have Melissa Smith, founder and CEO of Association of Virtual Assistants. Hello, Melissa.
Hi, Liz.
Hi. And we have assistant leader and the host of the podcast Optimize to Scale, Jacqueline Howard. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining. Before we get started, I thought you both could just give a quick introduction of who you are and your experience in the community. Jacqueline, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. So I'm Jacqueline, and I am a mom of 4, and I started in this virtual world when I was homeschooling all of them. They were 6 and under. You know, I had stair-step children, and the opportunity presented itself through a friend who had an online business, and that's how I got started in the industry. And I've been working as an assistant since 2015.
That's great. Wow, 4 kiddos. I'm kind of stair-step. My girls are a year and a half apart, and I don't know what that would be like if it were doubled. So
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how I really, you just like get through it. You can't overthink it when you're in the middle of the diapers and all that stuff. It's like, let's just get through it. So
good on you. Melissa, could you share a little bit about your experience and Association of Virtual Assistants?
Absolutely. So I always knew I wanted to become an assistant. My mom was an assistant. I went to secretary school back when that's what we were called. And I was an EA for over 15 years. And through some life changes and cross-country moves, I was working at a job that I absolutely loved in the Bay Area. And I had to go to them and give my notice. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I was moving back from California back to Georgia. And I went to my boss and I said, I got to go, basically. And he said, well, we don't want to lose you. How can we keep you? And I told him, I said, I could do most of what I do virtually. I don't have to be here in the office. So he said, okay, let's do that. I became their first remote EA, and we signed contracts each year. And he sent the follow-up contract to me along with everybody else. And I thought, I wonder if I could do this for myself. And so without a business plan, without really knowing at all what I was getting myself into, I started my own VA business and quickly realized I wanted to create the Association of Virtual Assistants, because the number one question that VAs have is, where do I find my clients? But also the number one question that comes from clients is, where do I find the right VA? And so this was back December 2014. I started my VA business, and I didn't know how I was going to create the AVA back then, but I knew I was going to take steps to that. So I started matching clients and became the premier VA matchmaker. I wrote a book on the subject, how to hire the right virtual assistant. Then VAs started reaching out to me, like, how are you doing this? So I wrote my book, Become a Successful Virtual Assistant. And now here we are, and we have the AVA, and now we're working to grow and build that for the remote workforce of the future.
That's awesome. And it's such a great segue into the first topic, which I think this is the number one topic that a lot of our Facebook community has discussed, a lot of our email community has been responding to and asking about is, so what does a virtual assistant mean in today's world? Because I think the reality of working remotely is starting to set in as long-term for the whoever knows how long future. And so I'd love to hear both of y'all's thoughts on just providing a little bit of clarity around what being a virtual assistant really is, and then what that means for right now. I'll toss it to you, Jacqueline, to start. Oh, you're muted for just a moment.
Sorry about that.
I still do it. And we've been, remote for like 8 months?
So I think there are kind of 2 ways of thinking about it. I think a lot of people use the term virtual assistant and they mean a number of things. Sometimes we'll hear people say, I need a virtual assistant to redesign my website. It's like, well, that's a website designer, right? That's not really a virtual assistant. Or some people will have a personal assistant and they also call that a virtual assistant because you don't need to be right there with the person to work for them and to help them with their personal schedule and things like that. So the term virtual assistant is being used to describe all kinds of people who are supporting someone remotely, right? So personal assistants, office managers, all kinds of things are being used for that term. But right now, I think um, since so many of us are working from home with all the different roles we have, I think right now it's being just anyone who's working remotely technically is a virtual assistant. But it kind of just depends, I think, on what you're talking about, like who's referencing it. So when I use the term virtual assistant, I do mean someone who's supporting someone as like an executive assistant or administrative assistant, supporting a CEO or supporting a project manager to get things done and increase the efficiency of the company and the workflow and things like that.
It's interesting you bring up uh, the different meanings of virtual assistant, because I think now, particularly with how the world is shifting, and this is something we believe at Base too, that every knowledge worker should have access to some assistant, to have some type of assistant resource. And I think that it's where some people think of a VA and what VA really actually kind of means is starting to mesh a little bit, because I believe that every worker, whether you're working remotely or not, knowledge workers should have access to some sort of, enhanced support like an assistant. But now it's becoming a not a forced need, but people are starting to really see that it's necessary because of our current working environment. Melissa, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Sure. So a remote EA is more commonly referred to and as an employee. It's an employee-employer relationship. So that's one of the first differences in that. And in fact, if you're looking for remote work as an EA, what they've done in the industry is, and it's really to elevate the assistant, is they've come up with these really creative names for assistants. And I often consult with individuals that say, don't look for the title executive assistant. I mean, if you can find it, great. Don't look for the term remote assistant. If you can find it, great. But really dig into those titles, because what they've done is come up with these really creative titles: remote rockstar, customer service success person. I mean, you name it, they've done it. And it's all really to elevate the title and the role of an EA, because we would say we're the Jack or Jill of all trades, and they understand that. So how do you create a title that really works within that? A big distinguisher between virtual assistants is typically virtual assistants are business owners. So we either work for ourselves or we subcontract for somebody else. They might be on a third-party site where they have other people get their clients for them, and then they just work for those clients. So that's a distinguishing factor as well. I would say when remote or not now or before, the biggest difference is the amount of freedom and flexibility you can create in your own life as a virtual assistant. When you are someone's employee, you're not creating a lifestyle business. You are creating a job that allows you to work remotely. And there's still some stipulations on that. So if you want it to be location independent, not all companies were on board with that. As a virtual assistant, you are not only tasked with doing the work of a virtual assistant, you are also tasked with running a business. And this is one of the areas where EAs who turn VAs often struggle, because we know how to be the best worker. We know how to serve our client and our executive best, but we forget we are our first business client. We have to serve our business first. And that means doing all the things that go along with running your business, including getting more clients. And now I'm going to respectfully disagree with Jacqueline, because a virtual assistant is a very broad title. It is a very broad title. And I consult with VAs all the time on this. I would stick with the term virtual assistant and then add what type of VA you are. So you could definitely be a VA who builds websites. I'm a virtual assistant matchmaker. I'm a virtual assistant consultant. There's virtual assistant design, Deb Sabo, social media, content creation, podcasts. The list is very long. But when we're thinking about how do I attract people to me? How do I attract people to my company? How do I market myself? How do I get people to come to me? They're not going to type in, I'm looking for someone who does XYZ. They don't really know what that is. What they're going to do is they're going to type in virtual assistant, because that's the term that's in every magazine, that's on every show, that's on every podcast. That's what all the coaches are telling them to do. They're telling them, go out and get yourself a virtual assistant to stop doing all this work. So they don't really know all the different kinds, and that's part of the mission of the AVA, is to really educate clients on how to do this and where to find a virtual assistant and what all we do. But sticking with that term allows you to be found by those who are seeking you out.
I love what you said about how when you turn to the business side of things, you're so used to serving whoever you're supporting, you forget, no, I'm my own client first. I would love, which, I mean, I came before I was a full-time employee at Base. I was a consultant for them. And I very much resonate with that. In running your own business, you have to think of yourself first, while also, of course, delivering the best service you can to your clients. So I'd love to hear from both of you on, and this is something that we heard from our audience as well. How do I learn to delegate the things I'm used to owning, so that way you can focus more on the business and spend your time more efficiently in terms of your business, serving your clientele, all those sorts of things. Jacqueline, we'll go to you first.
Sure.
So make it easy.
For me, what I did is, as I started to move away from only serving as a virtual assistant, and like she said, getting more focused on the actual business part of it, and so that I could grow and not just be in the weeds of other people's business, but also to grow my own business. What I had to do is make a list of, and this is what I tell other people when they're like, I want to hire a VA and I don't know what to even give them. I had to make a list of things that, one, that were repetitive and that didn't really require my brain. Like, it's things that I could just, teach someone else to do, and they could do things that involve a lot of strategy and things like that. I keep, and I do that. But things that someone else could do, I made a list of those things. And that's what I determined I would delegate. You're asking now when I wanted to delegate, or when a business owner wants to delegate. Is that what you're saying? How they determine that?
Yeah, and I would say it kind of, it's a little bit of both, maybe, right? Because, if you're managing your book of business, how do you know what to delegate to, or maybe more automate, actually, what to automate in terms, I guess, in this setting. So that way, and they might be things that you used to fully manage if you were just an assistant, just serving one client or, one leader. But when you're running a business, you're forced to have to automate some of your time.
Yeah. A lot of the things I automate are the sending of things, of links, of digital products. I also have an autoresponder for emails, because I'm not going to get to all of them right away. So I try to have an autoresponder that has in-depth information that a person might be reaching out to me for. So those things I can automate. And then as far as things I delegate are things that are done fairly regularly that do require human touch, but that don't necessarily require my strategy behind it. So that's how I decide for myself what kind of things I can delegate or what things I can automate. And then some things you just don't need to do, because I think as a virtual assistant business owner, it's so tempting to do a whole bunch of different things because it's fun. Like, we have a lot of different skills and interests, and it's tempting to want to be in all the different platforms doing all the different things. And so some things I just have to delete, and I don't need to be doing. I don't need to have it as a part of my business in order to grow. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
I think it does. And those things you were just talking about, I find those are the hardest things to determine what to let go of or what to keep doing. Melissa, what are your thoughts?
So I'm actually not a fan of delegation, because delegating is work, right? I have to sit down and I have to think about it, and I have to like figure it out. And so the measure of a true assistant, whether human or AI, is always going to be how well do we anticipate needs. And this is, this is what base is built on. Help an assistant do that better as well. And even when I was in an office, I was not tech savvy. In fact, I don't really identify with technology, which is ironic as a VA. So I love, services like Base and other things that make my life like click and point really easy. So coming up with ways to get rid of work that I don't enjoy doing has never been difficult for me. So one of the things that I really dislike are spreadsheets. Never liked them. And the spreadsheets are part of every assistant's life. And so even when I was in the office, I would just look through everything, and I would start to find the other people in the office, different departments. And I would notice some person was always like really in love with spreadsheets. And they would come to me and say, look at this formula I created. Look at this thing that I did. And I'm like, you're my person. So I'd go to my boss and I would say, hey, this person's doing these spreadsheets. They're awesome. They're beautiful. Like, I do this thing. I've already asked her if I gave her this, and she would maintain this, and I would take this work from her instead. Are you okay if we do that? It's, automating, it's, systematizing everything. It's making sure everything is housed and we're not siloing things. And they're like, that's what you guys want to do, then great, just make sure it gets done. And so I was already doing that as an assistant. So coming into my own business, I was not only looking for someone else to do the work that I simply cannot do. Like, you're not going to find me building any websites. You're not going to find me creating any systems or like putting in any technology, integrating, things, making sure they talk to one another. That's never going to happen. But I was not only looking to hire that person who was going to do that for me, but I was also looking to hire the person that's going to say, hey, like, you missed this. I need to also do this for you. Looking ahead, you're going to need this. Looking ahead, let's go ahead and put this in place because you're going to need that in the future. And someone who I didn't have to delegate to, but who was also going to do the work that I needed, anticipate my needs, and present me other options, because that's not my zone of genius. So I didn't even know other options were available to me. So from that standpoint, it was really easy. Now I'm to the point where I am really having my VA, well, depending on which one, work with me on other tasks that I just never could have imagined before, which are part of my emails and my calendaring and working in much more client interaction work. And those are things that are pretty sacred to me, but I just can't continue to do them and do all the other things that I do at the same time. So really bringing someone on who I had time to say, let's work together. Let's build this relationship. I'm going to start copying you on emails. You're going to learn my tone. You're going to learn what I say. We're going to have all these things done. And then I actually want you to take it and I want you to make it better. And now she's done that for me, along with just about everything else my other VAs do, because as I grow in my business, I'm going to start not being so good at some other things, but getting really good at these things over here. And I need to get better at these things, and they need to get better at these things. And I need to give them permission to do that. And it's really not creating another version of me. It's creating something better than me, which is, I often hear that from clients. I just need another version of myself. I'm like, you actually don't. Like, you actually need to create something that's franchisable, something that we can systemize, something that we can automate, something that we can make better. And you can't do that. You're just going to keep coming up with better ideas. You're going to come up with more things to do. You're actually going to create more and more work for yourself. We want people that are going to take that work from you and make your life easier.
On that note, I'd love to hear both of you dive into a little bit on building your clientele. I think for our audience in particular, several of them are looking for just where to start. What are those initial steps? What should you be thinking about as you're broaching into this? Jacqueline, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah. What I found most effective for me was my personal network and people, people that I knew, people that have worked with me before in some capacity. And when I started and I decided, oh, I want to grow this beyond just one client, that's where I started letting people know what I was doing and, ways that I can support, and just let them know, if you know of someone that is looking for this kind of help, or if you know of a business owner. That's how I started. And then from there, I would ask for referrals when I started to get a few clients, and maybe we just did like a 3-month contract, or we just did a one-time project. I'd ask them for referrals if they know someone else like them that could use some support. And that was the fastest way I found my growth. And the second way that has also worked for me, but I found a little slower, it's different for different people, but was Facebook groups. I joined various communities. Um, for the most part, I've supported course creators and coaches and things like that. And so I try to find groups where they're hanging out, and I've been able to get work that way as well. So for me, those have been the top two. And of course, being on social media and having a presence on LinkedIn and Facebook and even Instagram, I've gotten a few trinkles here and there from those as well. So those are the methods that I've tried that have worked. And so I know there's others, but those are the ones that I stick to.
Yeah, that's great
Yeah.
advice. For those watching now in the Facebook group, feel free to drop your own different communities in as well. We have a lot of different partners like yourself, you both, that are participating in the summit that have great groups to leverage as well.
Yeah.
Melissa, what are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree with Jacqueline. Starting with your own personal network is one of the most common ways VAs find their clients. It's super rare. I mean, it does happen, but it's rare that your very first client is just going to be this complete stranger.
Yeah.
Like 10 degrees of separation. That's so rare. It really is. And I would say the VAs that I knew that grew their business like super fast took on anything and anyone. And I was not that person. And it speaks to my business grew very slow in the beginning. And we tell VAs all the time, you really have to find your niche. You have to find your client. You have to find your lifestyle. You have to do all these things, but you won't be able to find those if you don't try, if you don't start somewhere. You have to start, even if you don't like it. There are ways to start out with, just work with this person for like a month at a time, or just 3 months. There's that light at the end of the tunnel, but you have to know like, oh, wow, I don't enjoy doing this, or, oh, wow, I'm really good at this. Because particularly if you come from that EA background, when you're all things to all people, you don't really know. Doing it for yourself now and doing it for your clients and doing it from wherever you're working at, it creates a much different dynamic than when you were moving at 100 miles an hour and not really thinking, do I enjoy doing this? That's not something that we just stop. Do I enjoy doing this today? Am I going to really get this done with my whole heart today? Like, that's not something that we do. We just do, we get the work done. And so what I found is when I finally decided, I wasn't able to do a lot of things because I didn't want to experiment with technology. I didn't want to set up these things with clients. I didn't want to do all these things. But I was constantly putting myself out there. I was constantly meeting new people, and I was networking. I was in groups, and I was a lot in association groups, and I was also in a lot of paid groups. I wanted to be places where people already spent money. And I wanted to get advice, and I wanted to get feedback from people who were investing in their businesses. The free groups didn't really speak to me that much because I noticed people were coming and going. I didn't know how invested people were. And I was in the mindset of this has got to work. I can't go back. This is hands down got to work. And then it really came to taking that risk, saying, I can do this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. So for me, becoming a matchmaker, really, I was working with clients and I was working on book management, and I had that, but something just still seemed like it was missing. And I was constantly saying, I feel like I'm meeting everyone else's client. And I was educating them on virtual assistants and what we do and how we do it and how we could best serve them. And at the end of the conversation, they would say, well, great, can I hire you? And I would say no. And they'd look at me like I was crazy. I said, well, I'm just not that type of VA. And they would say, well, where does one find that type of VA? And I thought, gosh, I know tons of people. And so it was connecting people like that. And it never occurred to me that something that was so simple, and this is key, something that was so simple, people would throw money at. They would hire me to solve their problem. And finally, one day, I just got so frustrated, and I thought, I wonder if this would work. So I was talking to a person, and I could tell the services that he needed, I could totally do, but he wasn't ready to part with his money. And so then I said, well, what do you want to do? What do you want out of your business? Like, here's like kind of getting a little iffy. I was frustrated already. And I'm like, what do you want? And he said, you know what I really want? I really want to create this newsletter and to get the system in order and to blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay, great. Well, what if I found that person for you? He's like, you could do that? I said, yes, I can. And he said, how much? And I threw out some ridiculous number. I said, $5.99. I don't know why. That was the most ridiculous number ever. But I said, $5.99. He said, okay, let's do it. Never had done it before, but I knew that I had been doing it. I knew that it had been successful. I knew that I could do it. And I just made it up as I went along. And he actually became a return client of mine later. I matched him with another VA a few years after that. But you just have to start. You're not going to get to a place where you're going to get better at something or really know what you want to do until you understand what you don't want to do or what you're not willing to do or what you don't really enjoy. There's so many things, and that's hard. I think that's the hardest part when you're like, but I can do everything. I can do a lot of things. I enjoy a lot of things. Well, really start doing them, and then really start defining, who are you doing them for now? Who's really throwing money at you? That's always the differentiator for me. Like, people can say you have a great idea. They can say a lot of things. They can talk really nice things to you, but until they're throwing money my way, we're not really having a true conversation.
No, that's all great advice. And I think what our audience can take from both of your advice is that when you're looking at your strengths and your weaknesses, or if you're trying to define what those are, don't forget to think about what you want to be doing. Just because you're really good at something doesn't mean that you should be doing it. Like your experience, Melissa, like you're like, you don't want me doing this for you because I maybe don't want to do this. And everybody knows if you're doing a job you don't enjoy, it's not worth it. And then in Jacqueline, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you actually froze for me, so I didn't catch that.
Oh, darn it. Okay.
So sorry.
No, you're fine. This is, our Zoom life. But as I went to speak to your point too, Jacqueline, in looking at your network and reaching out to people that you know, I think that that's something that personally for me, when I started consulting like 7 years ago, it was really hard to reach out to my network and say, hi, do you know someone that can hire me? So in having those conversations, it would be helpful, to make sure to say, I'm looking for a job that is, or for someone that's requiring support in these areas. So looking at what your strengths are and reaching out with those. We're also having, for you audience members, if you haven't attended yet or signed up yet, Lindsay Robinson, which is an EA at LinkedIn, is going to do a Rock Your Profile session. So she can help you with your LinkedIn profile. That helps identify what those needs are. Because I know sometimes it can be hard to list out what you think you're good at or what you're not good at. To kind of round out this conversation, I would love to dive into being a partner to your clientele and how you, a couple of things here, some best practices with working with your clients in terms of setting expectations, maybe structuring your time, and how to make sure that you nurture those relationships in addition to the work that you're doing so they're long lasting and meaningful, and hopefully would drive referral business, I think, as well. It's a goal. Jacqueline, let's start with you.
Yeah, so for me, one of the things, well, let me start with I've heard a lot in the assistant world where I know in the virtual assistant space, a lot of people say that title virtual assistant is not respected, and that a lot of people they just don't respect that role, and they don't look at you as a partner. They look at you as just I don't know, like you're a second, like an afterthought or something like that, or and that's why a lot of people aren't always comfortable using the term virtual assistant. They like to give it like Melissa was saying, you add on to the name to give some clarity, but also for some people, it makes them feel like it gives them a title that people respect. And unfortunately, sometimes that term isn't respected. So for me, in order to not let that kind of play with my head, I chose to position myself in my heart and my mind as a partner to the people I support. And I thought of myself as a partner, and I presented myself in that way. And it's kind of like what you give off is what they're going to receive. You almost teach them how to treat you, And so in partnering with them, in my mind, one of the things I like to think about is treating their business as if it were my own. And if I have to make a decision, maybe I can't get to them right away, I would put myself in their shoes. Okay, if this were my business and I needed to make this decision to move my business forward to best represent my business, what would I choose? And then when presenting to them, oh, this is what I decided and here's why. When you act like a partner, they start to treat you like a partner, and it creates this partnership. So I found that really helpful for me. And then also that remembering that being a partner with your clients is also back to how you name yourself and the terms that are used to describe the position. It's being a partner with someone you support. It's not really about the title. It's about how you are showing up in the business. So I think that's really, really, really important. And just like Melissa was saying too, thinking ahead, being able to anticipate what they're going to need, what's going to be beneficial for them, and then they become dependent on you in a good way, because they realize like the strengths that they have the weaknesses that they have are your strengths, and then they can rely on you to help balance them out and have a fuller experience. So those are the ways that I like to position myself more as a partner. It's not about the title or the position that you used to give. It's how you show up as well. So
I think that's great. And that's something that, one of the pillars of this summit, Empower 2020, is how to position yourself as a strategic resource, because that is truly what assistants are, is a strategic resource. So whether you're a virtual assistant watching this, or you are in any assistant or administrative professional role, I think that is some great advice to take away. Melissa, would love your thoughts on being a partner to your clients, best practices, and how to approach that.
Absolutely. So my personal business is the PVA, the personal virtual assistant, and it really is the boundaries that you set. The boundaries that you set and how you allow people to treat you. People will only treat you the way that you allow them to treat you. I don't allow people to treat me a certain way. I don't allow them to pay me less either. It comes up, title, the way you're treated, the money that you make. I'm in charge of sending out my own invoices. I'm not going to send out an invoice that I'm not proud of. So really creating those boundaries and setting them, and not saying, you have to treat me like this, you have to do this, you have to do that, but really saying, here's what you get when you work with me. And so I only work with people who value me already. It's not something I have to convince them of. I'm not in the business of convincing anybody. Now, I'm happy to educate anyone. They're like unsure and here's the number one problem, is that the majority of people looking for assistance now have never had an assistant. They've never had an assistant. And I think a lot of this comes from the last recession, when so many positions were cut and management was cut and resources were cut. And so only like maybe the top tier of those individuals in the C-suite still had an assistant. And so when people are questioning, it's because they really don't know. They're asking a question that they really want the answer to. And when someone tells me I've never had an assistant before, my heart like truly breaks. because I just can't understand it. In fact, one of my first jobs and one of my first roles as a VA, one of my largest clients that I ended up signing for $25,000 later, had never had an assistant before. And I told him, I said, I can't even imagine. And here's all the things that I would do for you if I was your assistant. And so when you think about that and you're trying to establish these boundaries and what it means and having this conversation with your client, the best place to start is in your consultation. I call it consultation. Someone else might cover it discovery call or whatever. You really have to say, like, you have to own that call. If the client's owning that call, you're not really a partner. They're just seeing you as someone, again, they have to delegate to, and they're going to just be sending tasks over your way, and they're doing all the work. So they can't really see you as a partner. But if you're asking thoughtful questions, if you're asking leader questions, if you're anticipating not just what they're needing now, but what they're going to need in the future and how you're going to grow with them into that role to support them, it really goes a long way. And I consider myself an absolute partner with all of my clients. They invite me to events. They invite me to personal conversations. I've been on the phone with them and their parents. I've been on the phone with their rabbi, their priest, other difficult conversations to kind of moderate. They definitely see me as a partner. And that's not something, again, I had to convince them of, but I had to show up every day. And then I had to do the things that made them think she is a partner. And again, that's going to be different for everybody. You really have to say, here's what you get when you work with me. And here's what I'm going to do for you. And here's what you know, when you work with me. And again, for every client, that's going to be different. Every client's going to want to hear something that's specific to them. So again, it goes back to your niche. Is it true for you? And is it true for your client? And when you've got that, then you've hit the sweet spot. Not all people are my clients. In fact, my private clients, they're quite challenging and quite difficult. And most of them I would never match with another virtual assistant, because I'm almost priming them to what it's like to work with somebody on that capacity, and they're just not ready yet. So I have to prime them and prep them on what it's like to really have an assistant and how you treat that person, because I have to go back and push back. But again, just like in any assistant career, if they want to pay you the big bucks, then it becomes worth it. And I'm good with that. But again, I constantly have to assert myself and say, nope, I'm not going to continue in this email thread. When you have reviewed what I said, or you want to call, you want to get on a Zoom, then I'll be happy to speak with you. But the second we allow those boundaries to be pushed, then the moment that they keep on getting pushed, and it's so hard to reestablish when you haven't established what is right for you and what is right for the client. So often it can't be one-sided. No one wants to work with anyone that says, treat me like this, do this, do that. And then they think, well, what do I get? What do I get? Where's my partnership? But when they wake up and everything's done for them, and when you've anticipated their needs, and when you said, oh, I did this, and by the way, I got us a discount, and I already negotiated the price, and we're going to have this service, and I already set up this call for you. That's when they're like, wow, okay, this is awesome.
Yeah, I love that. I think so many great takeaways from both of y'all there, and starting at even the beginning stages. So advice, I'm thinking, for our audience based off of what you guys were saying, is that when you do that initial outreach, or when you're reaching out to your network to try and find clients for yourself, know where your strengths are and what you can offer, and have that expectation yourself that there might be that education piece. And I think that is so true, because like my husband, for example, is a co-founder of a tech company, never had an assistant, and he's all, I don't need an assistant. I don't need an assistant. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But then when I actually sat out and said, no, you're going to work this into your budget. Did you know that these are the things an assistant can actually do for you? And he was like, oh, really? I was like, yes. Not only will it make your business life easier, but my life a whole lot easier too. So there were a lot more selfish motives there. But point being, understand that education piece, and it's not really showing your value, because the value got you in the door. They know you can be a valuable resource. So that next conversation is showing what specifically you can do for them. And then I love how both of you referenced owning your time. That's something that our CEO, Paige, says a lot, which is as an assistant, your one-on-one time with them, whether it's the initial onboarding of your relationship or any other weekly meeting or however off, whatever your cadence is that you're meeting, that is your time to own. And that not only helps you progress in your role, but it helps continue those expectations of how you work together, how you communicate, and how you should be treated, to your point, Jacqueline. Well, we're running up on time here, but we have had such great tips. I love all of the actionable takeaways that our audience can receive from this session. I really, really appreciate you both joining today. I will make sure to put all of the links and resources where our audience can find you, both on your podcast. I know, Melissa, you said you have a podcast that will have just launched, so I will make sure to include that on here as well. Were there any final notes or tips that you both wanted to share with our audience before we wrap up here today?
I'll just say, if I can do this, anyone can do this. And I would say that the number one thing that people do, that they want to become VAs, and they say, oh, I want freedom and flexibility. I want that freedom and flexibility in my life. I want freedom and flexibility to create a lifestyle. And it really is about creating that lifestyle for yourself around doing the things that you love, and then creating a business and really being able to do that for yourself and for your family. And we polled VAs, and 98% of VAs said that they would recommend being a VA to somebody else. And 98% said that they came a VA to have freedom and flexibility, and they are achieving that freedom and flexibility in their life. And for me and for many others, that's just priceless. And so I would say if someone's considering becoming a VA, you have my support, you have our resources. I wish you all the best, and please connect with me so I can be a part of your journey with you. I'd love to congratulate you.
That's awesome. Jacqueline, we'll toss it to you.
Oh yeah, I would definitely say that as much as the tech or all the different things can seem overwhelming, maybe not, for everyone, but sometimes all the tactical things, all the business, this and that, and all the different things that you may need to learn may seem overwhelming or really important, which they are. Mm-hmm. I would say that the most important thing that you need to really develop are your soft skills and your emotional intelligence or your emotional balance, whatever term you want to use, because anybody can learn technology or a new technique for something, but if you don't have the emotional fortitude and emotional mental health to be able to handle the up and downs that come with working virtually or starting your own virtual assistant business or working with all kinds of different personalities out there, that can be a bigger hurdle than learning how to use Zoom or something like that. So that would be my best piece of advice, is absolutely take time to learn techniques and tactics and tech and all that, but take just as much, if not more, time to learn yourself and to work on you, because really it's really a personal growth journey to, work for yourself, work remotely. Because when you have that personal victory with yourself, it's easy to have that business victory and all those other things. So that would be my best tip